So you can see that because I overfilled the bangle yesterday, there's some edges here that we need to get off of the bangle. So since these edges are very thin, I'll go ahead and cut them off with some heavy-duty kitchen shears. And all I'll do is just kind of follow around the shape of the bangle and at least get it a little closer. Those will sand off somewhat when we go ahead and sand off the extra here on our bracelet, but I'll go ahead at least now and get the big tags off. And it looks like it's a little more tricky on the inside, but at least I got some of the big ones off. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to sand your bracelet. So now we're ready to start sanding our resin bracelet. A few things you're going to need: a cookie pan or a jelly roll pan with sides, some wet dry sandpaper. Today I'll be using 220 grit because we've got a decent amount of resin to sand off. If you're just sanding off a little bit, then I would tell you 400 grit's probably okay. And we're going to need a little bit of water. And go ahead and pour the water into your pan onto your wet dry sandpaper. Now, a couple of reasons why we need to sand the resin onto the wet dry sandpaper with water. Number one, we don't want to inhale resin dust. And secondly, we don't want the resin dust particles to melt back into our piece due to the friction of sanding. So you can see here we've got our lip and we've got a little bit of a dome of sorts on top of our resin. And so we're just going to hold the piece down and sand. And you'll want to sand in a couple different directions, kind of like what we were doing when we were mixing our resin. And you'll just turn it over and check from time to time and see how we're coming along with our sanding, okay? So this is going to take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to sand, and I'll be back in a minute to show you what's going on. So you can see I've been sanding here for a couple of minutes, and you can see the edge is already starting to get a little flat. Some of those bubbles that we had yesterday that I didn't get popped in time, you can see here that we're sanding them out. And so the goal is by the time we're done sanding, actually we will have sanded those bubbles completely out of our piece. Okay, so I'm going to keep sanding. And when you sand, you'll want to go around in a circle, do your figure 8 pattern, kind of go back and forth. You want to make sure you're sanding evenly on all sides. So from time to time, just kind of turn your piece a little and sand that way as well. Okay. You can see our water's turning just a little cloudy. That's all of our resin that's sanding off. Would be dust if we didn't have it in the water. So obviously if you're going to use this cookie pan again sometime for cookies, you really won't want to use it for resin. Okay, we're making a little more progress. I'm going to keep sanding. I'll see you in a couple minutes. So I've been sanding for a few minutes, and you can see that I've gotten my edge down very flat, very nice. The bubbles are all gone, and I've got everything even. Now you may notice that the edge that was up, okay, meaning when we poured the mold, the edge that was up, you may notice that you may still have a few sharp edges either on the inside or the outside. You can take your edge and just ever so gently go along on your sandpaper to take off any rough edges. And the same thing too for your inside. Take a corner, you can even tear a piece off if you want, and just kind of go along the inside just to make sure you get off all the rough edges. Obviously you don't want to hurt yourself putting your bracelet on. And it should feel smooth to the touch. Basically, you don't want to hurt yourself as you're putting on your bracelet. So you'll stand up just a little more, take your edges down, and then you'll want to do this with finer grits of sandpaper. And it'll go much faster because now your edges are nice and even, and basically you're just trying to smooth it up. So you go all the way down to about a 1500 grit sandpaper. The sandpaper I'm using today, the 220 on down to about the 600, you can find at any major home improvement store. A 1500 or 2000 grit sandpaper, you're going to need to go to an auto parts store as it's used a lot of times in auto detailing. So I'll trade up my 220 grit sandpaper, and this is a 400 grit wet or dry sandpaper that I'm going to use. Same thing, you're going to want to put it down here in the water, make sure and get it wet, and then you're just going to sand it up the same way. All right, and make sure you go over your edges as well. If you use the harder grit on your sandpaper or the harder grit on your bangle, is you want to make sure and remove any marks. And keep doing this all the way down until you've got a nice soft finish that you like. Okay, so here is our finished bracelet, or at least finished so far. It's got a nice matte finish to it. We've sanded it down so it's nice and flat. The edges feel good. There's nothing sharp that's going to poke or be uncomfortable in any way. You can see we've got some really interesting color blends here. You can see I didn't poke in any of these or swirl them in any way. They did them all on their own. But you can see how the green kind of came that way and the yellow worked its way around this way. So we get some really interesting colors. Something else to point out to you is you can see here that I did not mix my powder pigment in very well with my green. However, the little bit of settling out I think kind of adds a little charm to the bracelet, so it doesn't bother me a bit, but just at least a technique point I'll make you aware of. Now if you're wanting that really bright, shiny, crystal, knock you down with shine finish on your bracelet, you've got a couple different options. Option number one is you can put some crystal clear epoxy resin onto your bracelet. To do that, what I would recommend is using one of the Resin Obsession dry mats and one of our brushes from the Cups Brushes and Stir Stick set. You'll mix your resin and actually take your bracelet and put it on here and actually brush a thin layer of resin onto your bracelet. Now to do this, obviously you're going to have to do it in two different pours because you're going to want to put some here, put it on the inside, and actually a little bit's probably going to drop down onto your bracelet, so make sure you still have your wax paper underneath, but you're going to want to thicken, make sure and get a nice thick coat on it because gravity is going to want to make it drip. And then of course once that is cured, then you'll be able to flip it over to the other side and apply a nice coating on top. Now if you're looking for a different option, we do have a second option available. Option number two to get a nice shiny finish to your resin bangle bracelet is to use the Cast and Craft Resin Clear Gloss Finish Sealer Spray. And what's really nice about this is you can apply a coat, let it dry, flip it over, and apply another coat. And you can do it pretty easily. The other nice thing too is it's great for your projects where you've just got a little tiny bit of tackiness on top. And instead of sanding it down, you can just apply a layer of this on top. We do carry this product at Resin Obsession, just to make you aware, because it is a aerosol product. It can ship only by UPS ground, and we only ship to the lower 48 states. So unfortunately, we can't offer international shipping on this product. But for those of you in the United States, in the continental United States at least, this is a great product to have on hand. So I'm going to spray a little bit of this on my bracelet, and we'll check back in a little bit and see how it looks. So now you can see our finished gloss resin bangle bracelet using that Cast and Craft gloss spray. You can really see it adds a very nice shine to it. So there we go. We now have a finished bracelet. If you would like to buy the products that you've seen me use here today, come on over to resinobsession.com. We also have our blog and jewelry making forum where you can ask questions and share your expertise. Thanks for stopping by today.